Moving to London or moving within London can be incredibly exciting, but also very stressful. And I'm not going to lie, it is a very competitive market right now. So if you are a renter or looking to relocate to London, then you're going to want to check out this video because I'm going to give you everything you need to know to secure that perfect new home. Hi everyone, Arinzeh here with Onyx Property Team and Keller Williams. I am a London-based property agent. I love helping clients buy, sell, rent, and relocate to London. So if you've got any questions about moving over, definitely drop me a line. Or if you just want more about the London property market and living in this incredible city, then make sure to subscribe because we put out weekly videos to give you all the information you need to know more about London. In today's video, I am speaking to those people looking to relocate or looking to rent a flat in London. It has been an incredibly competitive rental market. We have seen rents increasing 20% since 2019, and we've just had so much demand. A lot of it's come from the fact we're sitting in the middle of COVID. During COVID, when it first hit, landlords were really struggling to rent out properties. Some of them decided to take their properties off of the market. Perhaps they'd owned it for a long time, decided to sell. There was a stamp duty holiday incentive there for buyers, so that added to the mix. While you saw the demand side really crash, you no longer had international students. London's heavily reliant on international students. The multinationals were not sending staff over, and you didn't have those tourists. And then without the tourists, some of the stock that was short let was being dumped onto the long-term market. So now you had an excess amount of supply, very little demand. So that was kind of the story for 2020 and half of 2021. But boy, by mid-2021, about June, July last year, we saw an explosion of demand where international students started coming back. You almost had 2 years because of the people from the prior year who had started coursework who hadn't been able to come over. You had, staff starting to look to come into the market again, and yet you had a fraction of the stock because, as I mentioned, those landlords perhaps had looked to sell or withdraw the properties from the market. And so we've seen that strong demand. I recently rented out a property in Middleton Square in Angel, and we had almost 60 applicants. So you're just seeing a lot of interest. So if you are looking to rent, then you want to make sure you fully are prepared to be as competitive as you can, to move quickly, and to make sure you can secure the property you're looking for. So first on the list of preparing yourself is, what is your budget? I know that sounds pretty straightforward, but you really need to make sure you understand, how much you think you can spend. If you are relocating, London is going to have smaller properties than you might be used to, say, in America or other places. The other thing in some of our rooms or homes is we don't have a lot of wardrobe or storage space. So I mention that because that might be something if you have a property that doesn't have, any wardrobes or closet space that you might have to spend on your own. So again, you just want to consider your budget. Beyond just the rent you pay, you'll also have to budget for the other things such as utilities, broadband, TV license, which is quite unique to the UK, as well as council tax. And council tax is a tax to the borough for the social services of that borough supplies. So that is something that the landlord can pass on to its tenants. So you might be adding an extra £100-200 a month to your rent just on the council tax, depending on where you are and the size of the property. On average, for a good number of portions of central London, if you're, say, looking at a 2-bedroom flat, you're probably looking or going to have to be prepared to be seeing prices in the range of £2,500 pounds per month for a decent size 2-bedroom, if not more. The other things to consider, again, to make sure so that if you see something you like, is to take into consideration, let's say you're two professional sharers, then you might need two good sized bedrooms. And so sometimes when you see a 2-bedroom flat for sale, more and more agents are putting the floor plans on. You might want to check out the floor plan to make sure it's going to suit your needs. Whereas, say, if you're a couple, maybe the bedroom is less important because you're going to be able to be together in the living room lounge space. As more and more of us are working from home, perhaps looking for a space that has a separate kitchen with, say, a dining table might offer you a second space to be able to work from home, as well as a closed off, say, living room, or a bedroom that might have space for a good sized desk. You might also want to be thinking about, do you tend to prefer a more classic style property or say, or more modern? Modern buildings, depending on where they are, might offer you things like a gym and swimming pool. There might be a concierge there. There might be a residence lounge. There might be a rooftop deck. There might even be a resident cinema. Some even have, private offices or smaller rooms then you might be able to rent out or take meetings in. So if you, depending on, how much time you think you're going to need in the space, then that might also factor in the type of amenities you might want and be part of the rent that you're going to pay. And then what if you have a pet? I would say about 50% of properties in London might not allow pets, so that's definitely something you might as well ask the agent when you call to book in a viewing if pets are allowed, because if not, there's no point. Some landlords don't even mind having pets, but their building might have restrictions on allowing pets. So you definitely want to know that if you've got a furry friend you're going to want to have as part of your family. Once you kind of got your criteria, you can definitely utilize several key portals where you can find properties available for rent. They might include Zoopla, Rightmove, Booming, On the Market. Open Rent is one where landlords can advertise directly to tenants. You definitely want to check out any of those resources. Sometimes if you're working with a landlord, you just want to make sure that they're very professional, you've got the right documentation, and that they're going to take care and be responsive to your issues. Some people might like working with a landlord directly, but you just want to make sure that they're really above board and that you're well protected. The other thing you're going to need to think about, and you'll see this on the listings as you review properties, is do you need a furnished or unfurnished property? And again, in some places like America, it's a given that a property is unfurnished, but that's not so much the case here. I'd actually say about 60 to 70% of properties probably are available as furnished. So that's great if you are moving over and you don't want to incur the cost of shipping furniture. But it also means that some furnishings might not be great. You might get something that's very typical bachelor look, which is the black leather sofa with no personality, or you might get poor quality furnishings. So that's something you want to consider, is if you are looking for a furnished property, that it's good quality furniture. Or if you do have furnishings on your own, then you might want an unfurnished property. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And sometimes, again, I mentioned the wardrobe. So if a property is unfurnished, make sure that you can at least get those wardrobes and blinds and things like that, the basics that you're going to need to move in, and then sort out your furniture situation later. The other thing to keep in mind is that actually the rental rate or the asking price of a rent is an asking price. So you can actually make an offer when you go to submit and express interest in taking that property. One of the things I just mentioned is if there's certain things you want in the property, say you want that wardrobe, or you need something painted, or you notice something wasn't working, you want to make sure that when you're writing in the offer, you do include that so that they've documented that those things should be fixed before you move in. Right now, it is a landlord's market, so you also need to be careful if you're going to try to submit an offer for less than the asking price. If you notice that the property is heavily in demand and you really want that property, my recommendation is that you put in a full price offer, and perhaps even tell a little bit about yourself, why you want that property, who might be in that home, and how you would take good care of that property. I know some of the people on recent lettings that we've had have lost the property because they offered less, and my landlords just really went for the person who was willing to offer the full asking price. And then the people who missed out were quite sad because they would have offered more if they had been given a second chance. But in a very fast-moving market, you definitely want to put forth the most competitive offer if you really want that property. Now, when the market shifts back to being more the renter's advantage, then you might look to put in an offer, perhaps less than the asking price. In making the offer, one of the things you might want to consider that is part of the market here is a break clause. So say you wanted a 12-month lease, which is fairly standard, you could ask for a 6-month break clause. Now, again, in a competitive market, you might want to eliminate that because landlords are going to want to know that they've got the most surety of a tenant that's going to be in place for as long as possible. So say you know that you're on a 2-year assignment in London, and you might want to put in your offer at a full 2 years with no break clause. But if you're in a situation where maybe your job is precarious, you might get pulled back, or maybe you've got family issues that might mean that you're not able to stay the whole time, you could request a break clause. Now, just remember, if you ask for a break clause, then typically the landlord can ask for the same. So what you might have is a situation where you do need to stay for a minimum of 6 months, but you could ask for a break clause at month 6, but that means you should have given notice 2 months prior if that's what you've negotiated. But it could also mean that the landlord could then ask for the same break clause, and I'm actually running into that situation where my landlord has seen that the market has shifted so much that they're actually putting in for that break clause to take their property back so that they can achieve a higher rent. So that is a double-edged sword if you do ask for that break clause, but you are entitled to request that. But it is a negotiation, so a landlord can come back and say no. Another thing to mention is if you then get your offer approved, you're going to put a holding deposit. Now, the holding deposit has been capped as to 1 week holding deposit, and that's the other thing. We do quote rents in weeks, price per week and price per month. So when your offer has been accepted, you'll be expected to put down a 1 week holding deposit, which then really means this property will be for you, subject to you passing tenant referencing. So you just know that now no one else is going to get that so long as you get that property, so long as you pass tenant referencing. So once you've got that holding deposit in place, you're going to be asked to register to submit the details for tenant referencing. Now, I need to let you know, if you are a foreign expat moving over to London, it might be very difficult to pass tenant referencing. Why? Because you are going to need a bank account. Now, the difficulty in opening a bank account is you need an address. And the whole reason you're moving over and looking to rent that property is because you don't have a UK address. So it can be a bit circular and frustrating. But it will likely mean that without that bank account, you're not going to pass tenant referencing. Sometimes for perhaps a contracted, employment where there's a letter and it's a fixed, contract, perhaps some landlords might accept that in lieu of you passing tenant referencing because you're documenting that you will have this steady income. But if you're not able to pass tenant referencing, most landlords are willing to accept 6 months rent in advance in lieu of you passing tenant referencing. So that is something you need to be prepared to have saved up 6 months rent in advance. Some of my landlords will say we want, payment of 6 months rent in advance, and then the next payment due at month 4 for the next 6 months. So that way, if you're not able to pay and there's somebody who's causing issues, they can serve notice and get that property back at month 6 and they haven't lost anything. So again, just be prepared that you might not pass tenant referencing and you'll need to be able to come up with 6 months rent in advance. The other amount of money you're going to have to be prepared to submit is your security deposit. Again, the UK government has now capped security deposits to no more than 5 weeks. But if you are in a high valued lease, I think a lease whose annual rent is over 100,000, the landlord can ask for 6 weeks security deposit. So the security deposit is to protect the landlord for any damages that you as a tenant might do during the term of the lease that goes above and beyond wear and tear. An inventory report should always be done by a third-party registered inventory clerk. That way it protects both you and the landlord that there's a fair documentation of the current state of the property when it was handed over to you. We send in our third-party inventory control clerk, they do the report, and then they're usually the ones handing over the keys to our tenants, showing them the property and making sure that they know, anything that they might have identified or pointed out as potentially, like, let's say there's a major mark or burn mark or stain or something like that, that they have included that. Once that report is prepared, the tenants get 7 days to review it. And if they don't, acknowledge it, it's deemed as acceptable. But that is your chance to address any issues that you might have seen. I've worked with multiple, clients relocating to London. Sometimes we do see things, and we want to make sure that that's recorded into the inventory report so they're not held liable. Just prior to you moving in, you've obviously got to sign your lease, so you are going to get a copy of the lease to review. In this country, for standard leases are called an assured short hold tenancy. There's a fairly standard document that should be used, and any little provisions should be at the end of the document as special clauses. That way you're getting a fairly standardized document that is recognized in the English court system. For tenancies above 100,000, landlords, that you can use an alternative, more corporate-like document, a different type of lease structure to get signed up. So really, once you've signed your lease, paid all your front-end holding monies, then you've done the inventory check has been done with the key handover, you should be ready to move in. As I mentioned, make sure your budget includes for those additional things you're going to need to include so that you're not overly stretched. I hope this video has been helpful to you helping you get the best property possible in a really tough rental market. If you've got any questions or you want that help in finding your perfect piece of London as you relocate, then make sure to get in touch. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to know more about the London property market or discovering more of London, I put out daily posts on my Instagram channel, so make sure you follow me there at Onyx London Life. We'll see you on the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to check out my other videos on my YouTube channel where I share great tips and information about the London property market and living in this fabulous city. So that's Arinzeh with Onyx Property Team and Keller Williams. Bye for now.